just a vibe and a feeling that was like, this is going to go.
It's not about how you get there, because you can't have all the answers. It's who can get you there.
You wouldn't wish it on any business to lose kind of a co-founder.
It just goes to show the stress of owning a business and running a business.
Leadership isn't management.
Yeah, I know. And that's
leadership is what I always say John's good at, is seeing what no one else can see.
That's how it is, isn't it?
That's how it is. This is John.
And this is Nick.
And this is How It Is. One of the key moments, I think, in Octane's history has to be the passing of Dan Kirby, which I think affected the whole industry. But internally, that must have been a challenge. How have you guys, got past that and managed to stay successful?
Well, yeah, look, I mean, it's huge, and you wouldn't wish it on any business to lose kind of a co-founder. I mean, obviously, Dan was heavily involved in trade price cars at that point, so he wasn't as involved within the Octane business. So obviously, huge shock. I mean, looking back, you kind of see some of the sort of the signs, but at that point, it hit everyone. I mean, I remember speaking to John on like the morning it happened, and yeah, it was just one of those things you just never think is going to happen, and particularly for Dan, because he wasn't that sort of person. He was very much, it was kind of life and soul, but he was fantastic with people.
He was a gentleman. He was just a wonderful person.
He was always the first person. If someone had an issue, how could he kind of help sort it? He was very much, if you've got a problem, come to us. It was the first to help people. So for all that happening, I mean, you really can't put it into words when it happens. For the business, I think it pulled everyone together. It certainly brought a lot of things, as you've just said, Nick, to the front of our kind of thoughts in terms of the industry. Huge outreach. I mean, of people within the business, within the industry, reaching out and saying, you guys need any help. We're here. Obviously, Ben as well.
I think we'll put a link for that in the YouTube.
Without a doubt. I know that Ben, certainly in the last few years, I've seen a huge jump in mental health requests. We know they're massively underfunded. So I think anyone, if you're in the motor trade, that should be one of the charities that you get involved with, whether that's through Bangers for Ben. I mean, we're doing a golf day for Ben, so there's kind of always stuff going on. But in terms of like for Dan and his legacy, we just need to make sure that we're doing the right thing.
I think it just goes to show the stress of owning a business and running a business. And it must be like that with at times you must have been in pretty dark places. I'm assuming. I know I have, but
yeah. I mean, I do like to think I'm fairly kind of easy. I'm fairly easygoing, but when you get an obstacle like that, and everyone's asking you what's happening with the business and what's going on, luckily, like I said, from a pure business perspective, Dan wasn't as involved at that point. So, but for Dan Horner and for John at We Finance Any Car, they were really close with Dan, and for them, I still can't fathom how it affects them. But he's very much in the business in spirit, and we think about him all the time. So, and try and emulate what he would have wanted and where the business is going, because he was, without his vision and Dan's vision at the start, Octane wouldn't be there. So just keep it going, keep it carrying on.
So slightly different to that, how do you think your leadership has changed through the years, Octane?
At Octane,
or just go on, full stop, full stop from start to finish.
So in terms of, I mean, I've been used to sort of running, certainly from a motor trade perspective. I went in as a business manager. I had 10 salesmen. Moving to Porsche, probably the biggest challenge I had in terms of leadership would have been arriving at Porsche as a business manager and then transitioning to a general sales manager, because you're working with the same people and they perceive you as one role and you're moving up to the next role. Then I took a role in digital after that, which wasn't purely leadership, but I was looked upon as one of the more experienced people in the team. So there was a lot of questions that came at me. But then coming to Octane, I started off running the Kent area, and then as things progressed, running the sales team. The main thing really, and I think one of your previous guests echoed this, never ask someone to do something you wouldn't do yourself. Be really clear with the vision of the business. Make sure everyone understands that we're going this way. You know, we need to be on the same bus, all facing the same way, right?
Yeah,
So
I feel it is.
for us, it's consistency. Again, building the culture, as Nick alluded to earlier, was really important. Finding the right people. You know, with what we do, we can train most things, but it's getting the people with the right attitude. My leadership style, if you like, is made really easy because the people that are in our team, just, you know, they know what's expected, they know what they've got to do. Everyone knows the target we're driving for at this point in the month or the point in the year. So it's about, like I say, consistency and clarity.
The word culture is overused massively, especially on LinkedIn and videos and stuff, but it's not what people see externally, it's what you feel internally, I find. And the key point for us, that where I knew our culture had got to a really good point, was when we had a member of staff join the team and the staff decided that they weren't good enough. The staff went to one of the leaders and said, this person isn't pulling the weight, they're not acting in the way we want. We need people to, so that we can be productive. And there wasn't a personality clash, there was no bullying, it was just, we want to be productive and this person isn't up to our standards.
Yeah.
And isn't that lovely when almost the people decide that the standards aren't being achieved rather than that must make your job easier. I think you must do the same thing.
I think that's a great reflection on what you guys are doing, because that means your team know what's expected, and they want to do, you know, they're with you on your journey. They want to do what you want to do, and it's almost self-policing, isn't it?
Yeah,
So
and
but leadership isn't management.
Yeah, I know, and that's
leadership is sometimes, and what I always say John's good at is seeing what no one else can see. You know, again, I'll use another shitty word from the internet, visionary.
Yeah.
You know, is that just that being able to see the impossible dream, and that, I think that in itself is leadership.
Yeah, but that's where, again, you know, Dan Horner, for instance, you know, he's very much, you know, he knows where he wants to go. He knows what he wants to do. It's really a case of how we're going to get there. And you know, that can't be on one person's shoulders. That needs to be a team effort.
What's been the most difficult decision since you've been at Octane you've had to make?
Most difficult decision. I can tell you what the easiest decision was.
Go for it.
So the easiest decision was joining Octane.
So did they headhunt you, or did you, how did that come about?
It was kind of a conversation really between me and Dan Horner, and sort of talking about, you know, how's it going with JBR? What you looking to do? Would you come and work for us? And so I met with Dan and sort of said, yeah, you know, this would be good. I hadn't really spent any time with Dan Kirby at that point, so I get Dan Kirby on the phone. Right, when can you meet for an interview? So I'm thinking it's going to be 3-4 o'clock at Trade Price Cars. No, typical Dan Kirby style. It's meet me 7:30. Alex is in Chelmsford, which is a fabulous restaurant, right? So I think my interview was.
Is that where we went?
We went there.
We went there.
You took us there.
So that's a great restaurant. So yeah, from 7:30 till 11 o'clock, and literally we did not stop talking. And at that point, I don't think I knew what the package was, what the hours were. It was just a case of almost where do I sign?
Yeah.
Because there was just a vibe and a feeling that was like, this is going to go somewhere.
This is where I think that maybe Dan was ahead of the curve there, or certainly compared to us. There was a book that I read not that long ago called Who Not How, and it was about, if you want to get somewhere, it's not about how you get there, because you can't have all the answers. It's who can get you there.
Yeah.
And I'm guessing they identified you as one of the key people who could get them there. You don't then have to map it out. You just have people who, just by being in the business, you'll all find the way.
Yeah. It's surrounding yourself with the right people. You know, like, again, coming back to the Fortis piece. You know, having an in-house marketing team in an independent car dealer back when they did it was almost unheard of. Yeah. So it's little things like that. But I mean, and again, it's also who you pair with in terms of. We're out with our business, but technical partners as well, making sure you've got the right people, and don't, you know, we kissed a few frogs, we've made a lot of wrong turns as well, but
you have to,
yeah, because you've always got the risk of not trying it. So there is a mentality where, you know, we'll try
fail
stuff.
and fail fast.
Yeah, if we don't make it with this, we'll do it a different way. Or that, you know, we made some system changes last year, which we thought would work really well. Complete opposite. So we've reverted back to what we do well again.
I think when you're of a certain size and you care enough, you think everything's going to be critical, don't you, at the time? When you make a mistake, it's like, oh God, this is disastrous. But I think over time you understand that you're just going to make some mistakes. And as long as you're not making ones that are literally going to put you out of business, people will understand, and understand that you're trying to do things for the right reasons. And as long as you've got your integrity, those mistakes, they don't actually hurt you as much as you think.
No, and it's taking those mistakes, learning from them, and then putting systems and processes in place to protect the business so it doesn't happen again.
Yeah. Any risks that you've had to take at Octane?
Risks? Well, I mean, ultimately, yeah. I mean, we do every day, right?
That's true.
I suppose our biggest risk ultimately is the fact that we've got all these finance deals out there, and almost every single one of those is at risk until it's a paid off deal, right? A completed deal. Risk within the industry for us would be problems with vehicles, problems with customers. Customers don't seem to talk to car dealers about problems with cars. They seem to talk to finance companies now. All of a sudden,
that's probably your relationship with them. I would say though.
Yeah, definitely.
With regards to that, do you think fraud is getting much more kind of sneakier and better? And
there's definitely things that are changing on the fraud front. I mean, we use a company called Apply ID who manage who do our biometric fraud checks, and having chats with Russ, the guy that owns that business, some of the things that are going on in the dark, deepest world of fraud is pretty scary. I mean, I know for a fact we have probably better ID verification than some of our lenders, because we need to protect ourselves. Ultimately, between us and the dealer, we're holding the baby if something goes wrong. So we want to mitigate risk as much as we possibly can. We've got a new thing coming out in about a week's time, which will be lowering that risk even further in terms of using open banking to verify certain additional information. But again, for us, it's trying to spot fraud early. But don't forget, there are still some really basic things that people don't do. It's for me, the giveaways are customers dealing at distance, and all of a sudden the delivery address changes.
Yeah.
Right. That's a massive marker. We've seen some hilarious people trying to get past our Apply ID. So we've had so it does it takes a video of you, right? It takes like a selfie video, and we've seen people where they're holding the camera and they pick up a photocopied A4 picture of a driving license to hold in front of it. But you see this as a 3-second video. It's hilarious. So, fraud is an issue without a doubt across the industry.
Do you think the authorities are doing enough to combat fraud? Because it seems to me that it gets put on business to stop fraud at the point, but surely one of the issues is the fact that it's being enabled at all and there's no comeback. So, for instance, you might stop a fraudster, but where's the comeback afterwards for people to know the failure isn't just, I won't get that dodgy loan. It needs to be, if I try this and get caught, I'm going to be prosecuted. Do you feel like people are doing enough?
I mean, again, credit card companies are very similar to this. They don't worry about fraud. I think there's only been a couple of cases that I'm aware of where the actual kind of authorities have actually got involved and done something. And the big problem is people are out there, and what we're finding, particularly the fraud tends to be on more the prestige cars, because you're not going to do it for a $6-7 grand car. It needs to be an expensive car, but they're hitting 3 or 4 dealers at once. So in theory, you could have 3 or 4 proposals going through, all get accepted, all get paid out the same day, all get delivered the same day, and there's 4 vehicles out there which are then going to get disposed of. But no, I think it is a bit too lax, and I don't think there's enough that certainly we see that goes on around. What's the as you said, what's the upshoot if I do it, how's it going to hurt me?
So if you see a potential fraud, what's the process that has to happen there?
So for us, obviously, the deal stops. We're very mindful that, in terms of tipping off, we can't be doing that. Quite often, we're spotting it before the deal's gone live, usually through the ID verification. And without a doubt, I mean, we're probably, it's a handful of deals every month that we're spotting. If it's getting through our ID verification, then it's
sophisticated.
Yeah, I mean, you're never going to. There's some sorts of fraud you will never stop it completely. I'm a believer in that. But we do everything we can to reduce risk to everybody, because ultimately the dealer, us, the lender, we're trying to do the right thing with that.
So at that point, does it get reported to the lender, I'm guessing?
Yeah.
And then does it get reported to Action Fraud or anything like that, the authorities?
We would just put it back through the lender, and then they'll have their own process for dealing with that. But I mean, Action Fraud, from our experience, there's not a lot of
It sounds like there needs to be more collaboration, even if it's through the FLA. Maybe they are doing something, but it seems to me like there needs to be almost a case put together to go to government and say, this is how serious this is. And whether that's, cutting, but we're doing a bit of the Elon Musk over here and trying to cut some red tape, it seems, at the moment.
Yep.
Maybe that's something that needs to happen around fraud, because a lot of the fraudsters are in the UK. I think a lot of people think that fraud's only happening from abroad. But with this car finance stuff, of course, there are people having to facilitate it in the country.
Yeah, without doubt. When we're seeing, again, it seems to be, there are people that are obviously facilitating fraud, but also the rise in ghost dealers, where basically a dealer gets effectively imitated by a fraudster. And again, we've seen that. But for us, because we deal direct with dealers and we will go and make sure we visit the dealer before we sign them up, we kind of, again, we lower that risk. But for us, if the dealer rings up saying, I need to get set up with you guys really quickly, I need to get this deal done, that's an instant red flag. But we are definitely seeing a rise in that. And also, some of these ghost dealers, that's the business behind it. It is just doing fraud.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Somebody's phone ringing in the background there. So how do you keep ahead of the curve? How does Octane? How do you keep ahead of the curve in, all these like KYC and business in total?
Right. So for me, it's having a great network of people around us. We're constantly catching up. We're constantly speaking to. We have great relationships with our lenders, with all of our affiliates. So for me, keeping up with the curve, it's a lot of reading of the trade magazines and looking at things that maybe aren't in the industry and what other industries are doing. Other maybe straight retail industries, how they're changing things. A couple of the systems we've got implemented now weren't really motor trade based, but have been adapted for what we want to do with it, because it was a great thing that existed outside of our industry, and we've pulled it into use within Octane. But essentially, a lot of it is purely just a good network of contacts and people giving you information about things that are happening, and so relationships, mate. That's the crux of it. I wouldn't even want to see my phone bill, my minutes. So it's all about conversations and almost networking on a daily basis.
You mentioned affiliates. What about staff then? How do you go about getting your staff? What makes that perfect member of staff for you?
For us, the perfect member of staff. So we've got two very different teams. We've got our field sales team, and that person needs to have, in the words of Liam Neeson, a certain skill set to be able to do that job. And
that sounds like a new social media post for you guys. That does.
I've got a particular skill set with my dealers. So those people have to have a particular skill set, or a particular attitude. Some of our best performers, weirdly, have not come from a pure finance background. They might be motor industry, but they've not been from a pure finance background. So as we said at the beginning, it's about attitude. The other bits we can train. Team player is so important for us. I know everyone talks about it, but genuinely, those guys the guys in the office, they're in there 7 days a week. It's a busy environment, so they've really got to be, team players.
How do you genuinely work out before you hire someone if they're going to be good as part of a team?
I think recently we've been using a recruiter, and she gets Octane as well. She understands what we're looking for. But no, I think a lot of it is you go with your gut. If you think, because CVs can be so all over the place, can't they?
I hate them. I hate CVs. I say to every candidate that I don't believe in it. It's the 80-20 rule. 80% of it is bullshit. 20% is the truth.
Yep.
And I don't blame them, because they're there to kind of like put themselves on a pedestal and kind of say, this is how good I am.
You're trying to promote yourself, aren't you?
But you can suss people out just by having a good interview or presentation.
No, I mean, a lot of it will be gut feel. How do they get on?
Well, look, Ian, it's been great talking to you. But before you go, we have a little segment of the show where our last guest gives a piece of advice. And while you're listening to this, you need to be thinking of what advice you're going to give
Right.
to the anonymous next guest. So
Right.
the advice that came from Gareth at Bulb Tech Group
Said it earlier.
is keep knocking the door.
Wasn't it?
Sorry?
No, I thought I thought he said what Gareth said. Don't ask somebody to do something you want not prepared to do it yourself.
Well, maybe it was that as well, but it's not what I've got written down, so we'll do both.
I'm sure that's what he said, because I'm sure it was. I rewatched this back, but maybe I'm wrong. Go on.
Well, that's good advice too.
Thank you.
And the other advice is from whoever it was from, is keep knocking the door, because eventually the right one will be opened by the right person.
That's great. Yeah, I like that. Really like that. Because, and it's really true, especially in what we do, where again we've got a team of people that are out there literally knocking on doors, and you might. I know Danny Sams, who's now our sales director, was prolific for not taking no for an answer.
Yeah.
And funny enough, actually, one of the best things we ever had. He'd been going to his dealership for months and months and months, couldn't get anywhere, and he decided to send a video of himself to the dealership. Right? So he's literally on his phone, done a video. Hi, I'm Danny from Octane Finance. Love to have a chat with you. Want to see if we can help you guys out. That email found its way to the owner of the business, got past the sales team, and the guy was literally straight on the phone to Danny. Come in and have a chat with me. Yeah. So you're right. Yeah, you knock on the right doors, and
we're knocking on it in the right way. Then I guess.
Right way. Yeah.
So, what would your advice be to anyone in business, in leadership?
So, that's a difficult. You've really put me on the spot here.
That's the idea.
So I think one thing that kind of has resonated with me, and I was told this years ago, just be kind to people, because you're on the way up, but at some point you're going to be on the way down. So I would say, really simple. Just be kind and treat people as you'd expect to be treated.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's great advice to finish. Ian, it's been great having you on the podcast
pleasure.
today.
Great to be here.
And where can people find Octane Finance?
So really straightforward, www.octanefinance.co.uk. TikTok, Octane on TikTok, Octane on Instagram, Octane on Facebook, every other social media channel you'd want to go on. Check us out. Just check us out. We're everywhere, literally everywhere. So yeah.
Thanks again.
Great. Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Thank you.